Welcome to Growing Belleville Through Community Chats, a podcast presented by the Greater Belleville Chamber of Commerce to help highlight, promote, and enlighten people, businesses, and community events in the Greater Belleville area. Here are your hosts, Stephen Sedlak and Eric Huber.
Good morning and welcome to another edition of Growing Belleville Through Community Chats. I am your co-host, Stephen Sedlak, along with Eric Huber. Good morning, Eric.
Morning, Stephen. How are you?
Getting through the week. Nice sunny day, middle of winter. I'll take it.
Absolutely. Need to be on a golf course right now.
I'd love it. Well, we are joined by Jenna Renner Graser today, our second attempt at recording this. We had some technical difficulties before, but we'll hopefully get through this one here. Jenna, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning, guys. I'm doing well. How are you all?
Wonderful, wonderful. Why don't you give a little background about yourself for some people that might not know you?
Sure. Well, like you said, my name's Jenna Renner Graser. I have been born and raised in Belleville, grew up in Belleville. I work at Renner Funeral Home, and I have probably been, I've been hanging out at the funeral home for as long as I can remember. So I'm excited to be here this morning.
Now, when we tried this earlier, we had some discussion on, and I kind of want to revisit it. We had some discussion on kind of your history with it and how you got into it. And like you said, you kind of grew up there, but a little bit more in detail of where you went to school, what you did to make the decision to come back to work full time at the funeral home.
Sure. Well, I guess I started thinking back, it was probably my junior or senior year of high school. I had not been really working at the funeral home on a regular basis. And one particular summer, like I said, maybe my junior or senior year, the guys were going to be a little short-staffed for the summer. And so my dad said, hey, you want to come to work, make some extra spending money for college or whatnot? And I said, sure. So that's really when I really first start remembering being around the funeral home, sometimes 40 hours a week that summer. And, it started with cutting the grass, answering the phones, washing the cars. And then next thing it turned into, hey, we're busy today. Put on a suit. You can go on a funeral with us. Or, hey, I need you to help us. I need you to help go on a death call with us. Just kind of snowballed from there. By that time, I had already been at St. Louis University. I got my undergrad in accounting. And then after that, just from working summers and Christmas breaks and weekends and visitations and whatnot at the funeral home, by then I decided that this was something that I was called to do. And the next thing you knew, I was in mortuary school. So it's just kind of how it all played out.
Now, you guys have some quite family dynamics when it comes to the business. Mm-hmm. You guys, was it 1929? Everything originally started, right?
Yes.
Kind of tell people that don't know, I guess, a little bit about the history and where the business is now in regards to family, I guess. Sure.
We are currently operating in the fourth generation of funeral directors and embalmers. We're all related. And the history of the funeral home is it started out, my great-grandfather, who's George Renner, he started the funeral home back in 1929. He operated across the street from our current location for about 5 years. And then in 1934, he had the opportunity to purchase the building that we are currently located in, which is 120 North Illinois Street. So he, of course, had 6 sons that joined him in the business, which became obviously the second generation of Renners working at the funeral home. And then they, in turn, all had a son that went into the business with them. So the third generation, they all became first cousins. So they are still around the funeral home. We'll call them part-time or semi-retired, still very much key players at the funeral home. But now we are currently in the fourth generation, which is my generation, along with my cousins that are currently operating the funeral home. So Belleville is our main location. We do have funeral homes also in Freeburg and Smithton. But that's a little bit of the family history there.
How is that family? You know, I like I said, I have a family business too. I've worked with my dad, and it's got its advantages, but there's also some times that it can be a little tense and whatnot. So I just have him and me. You know, you have a totally different dynamic where you have cousins and your you know, and then also your father, but more family as well too. So how is that dynamic played out? And you know, you don't have to get too into details if you don't want to, but I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. A lot of people say that, oh, how is that working with your family? How is that working with your dad all the time? I have to say it works out very well, at least from our family's perspective. Yes, you know, we're all working hand in hand with our dads, but they, you know, who better to learn from your profession than the gentlemen before you who have been in the trenches, who have done the exact same things, who know what you're going through. They're great role models to learn from. And, you know, as dads, they're patient with us when they need to be. I guess, you know, sometimes there may be some tough love when there needs to be, but they, it's just great. And the generation that I have, like I said, we're cousins, but I don't have any brothers. I have an older sister, and I kind of look at them as my brothers. So, you know, all things considered, it really works well, and I love working with my family.
Jenna, what you know, I love asking people who are involved in the family business. I did not grow up, both of you guys did, but you know, one of the questions I always ask is, you know, how is that growing up with the family business? You know, is it dad and uncles, you know, basically saying, okay, who's taking over, who's coming in, or do they really allow you to get in there, like you said, in high school, kind of get your feet wet, see with your own eyes, and kind of make a decision from there? What's that like growing up in that type of you know, industry with the family business going on? Sure.
It is very much you're there. You're getting your hands dirty. You're getting right into the nitty gritty of it. Growing up, specifically the earlier years, it was never, you know, talked about at home. My dad would come home from work. He would talk about the funeral home a little bit, but it was never like an expectation that is where I would end up. And it wasn't until, and it's not just me, it's the same with my cousins. It wasn't until we were just, like I said, hanging out at the funeral home, seeing what they did. And you just, little by little, you learn what all goes in there. And when you're, you know, sometimes it takes you to be in that building, you know, sometimes what can feel like 24/7 to really learn all aspects of the funeral home. And like I said, just, well, the older I get, the more I realize it's a calling to serve. So we didn't grow up expected to end up there. It's just, you know, I guess it's in our blood, and that's just what happened by working alongside our family.
That's a good point. And I know we kind of touched on it last time when we had some issues, but I kind of want to touch on this again. But your hours that you have are all over the place, all over the board. And you know, growing up, you saw it from one perspective of your father working those hours, and now you're in the same you know area doing the same thing with kids of your own. I guess how has that your view from a child, with it being your father, to you now having to do it with the view of your children below you? So it's a hard thing to balance, I'm sure, but I'm just kind of curious how your perspective has changed on that, or has it changed on it?
Sure. You know, any career path you choose, work-life balance is something that you've got to have a handle on. Growing up, I saw my dad working nights, being at work on weekends, holidays. So from that aspect, I don't know any different. A lot of my cousins don't know any different. That's just what we grew up seeing, you know, our dads were at work. Now I have a little bit more of a leeway being a working mom with 3 small children. I am sometimes in and out of the house a lot. We do have now with current technology that maybe they didn't necessarily have generations before, we are able to be on call a little bit more at night instead of 24/7 at the funeral home.
Sure.
So for the working mom and me, that's great for work-life balance. But, you know, it's the same with my kids. They don't know any different. They know when mom's leaving, she is going to work because somebody needs her help. And, you know, they handle it well. They understand, you know, what's going on. And I'm sure they just see it the way I did when I was younger, too.
And I'm sure your husband knew what he was signing up for, correct?
I made sure he did. When it's funny, when I kind of figured that he may be a keeper or somebody that was going to be around for a while, I actually told him, I said, if you want to know what it's like to be married to a funeral director and embalmer, you go have a talk with my mom and let my mom tell you all there is to know about what it's like to be married to a funeral director, and this is your out now if you'd like to get out. And he's stuck around, so.
Good.
Yeah, I was going to say, Stephen, as long as we continue to get Neil on our Tuesday night softball leagues out at O'Fallon, if we need babysitters, we can call and get some help, but we need them on those Tuesday nights, man.
Yeah. When I work on Tuesday nights, it's a problem for their softball schedule.
Oh man, I kind of want to shift to the talk that in regards to the last 20 months or so, and I don't mean to beat a dead horse on this podcast and talking about COVID, but I just think it's an important aspect that, well, of course, sometimes now we're dealing with. Again, I just saw the other day that Big Daddy 618 is temporarily shut down for the time being, just for the next couple weeks, I think. But it's affecting everybody, either still or again, and how you guys had to deal with it is a different aspect than maybe other people have. So kind of how did that all play out, I guess, and what were the steps that you guys took and how that all transpired?
Sure. Well, as you all know, specifically back in 2020 and very much now, things are fluid. Guidelines were changing. Sometimes it felt like by the hour, and it's just a kind of a new, sometimes scary world that we were living in. As far as on the funeral director side of things, I was thinking back, and it's our job to walk families through sometimes what is the worst, most stressful point in their lives, and to walk them through that step by step. And so, early on, and still a little bit now, it was, I couldn't offer a family who maybe was grieving, who was stressed out, who hadn't slept in weeks. I couldn't offer them a warm cup of coffee when they came in. I shouldn't have been giving them a hug or a handshake. And that was hard. And that's out of our nature as caregivers. And it makes a horrible situation for families, just even harder to go through. And so our hearts just go out for them. Or then too, for a long time to have to sit there and tell families, well, we can have a funeral, but it can't be public, or we can do 10 people at a time. And to sit there and tell people that you can only have 10 people at a time, or whatever the regulations were at that time, that's hard when it comes from our background where we want to nurture and care for families. But you make the best of it, just like all businesses have to do, and you get through it. And then from the embalming side of things too, you always treat every individual that comes into your care with universal precautions, but just the unknown in the beginning of what was all going on with this virus, and how do we keep ourselves safe? How do we keep our staff safe? Do we have enough equipment on hand to do that, especially when supplies are running low? So it really was a little stressful at times, just a lot of the unknown, and just caring for families. You just have to look at it in a whole new dynamic. With technology too, just like this, we've had technical difficulties as not only funeral homes, but as businesses. Can you grow? Can you, now we can offer somebody, if they're not comfortable coming into the funeral home, we can make arrangements with them completely remotely. We can do funerals, recorded or webcast now. So it just really makes you pivot a little bit and figure out, okay, how are we still going to, given the situation that we're in, the circumstances we're in, how can we still best serve the families that are walking into this building, who quite frankly still need our care?
Jenny, you touched on that, with kind of your generation, kind of the younger generation in there, and maybe prior to COVID. I mean, obviously you probably never even thought of, live streaming a funeral. I mean, did you guys even have any of those type of discussions, or more technology based? Because like you said, I mean, people are going through probably the worst time of their life at this moment. Mm-hmm. And like you said, not being there in person form is probably just terrible. So, like, how did you guys quickly adjust to those, going technology, doing the live stream? I mean, was there a lot of discussion with the family with that?
Yes and no. I mean, with my family, with the Renners, it was just, okay, what do we need to do? And I'll tell you, in the beginning, Zoom was a wonderful thing because that is easy to learn and it quickly serves its purpose. And then, the longer this goes on, the more you just, you learn about the technology, you learn what's out there. And as you guys probably know, when you quickly need to know how to do something, you tend to figure it out pretty fast. So.
And I think that's a good point. I want to go back to what you just said a little bit ago, is that you guys pivoted, when everything hit. I think, to me, with COVID, that's kind of what I think, because so many businesses had to pivot and they were almost thrown into just right away, just having to figure it out. And yes, it's been hard on a lot of businesses, and I don't mean this in a bad way for any that have had, suffered from it. But I think the one positive that did come out of everything was the ability for businesses and people to pivot and find different ways to do it. So I'm kind of curious, do you think you guys are in a better situation now than, say, pre-COVID when things happened? About the same, or kind of where do you view you guys are at right now?
Sure. I think what I would say is we're in a little bit more of a flexible situation because we can offer different types of services to meet the needs of families. Not that we couldn't before, but even more so now, just because, with families not all being in the same state, even if, right. When there's not a pandemic now, we can offer somebody the chance to watch a funeral where they would have missed it completely due to, they couldn't catch a flight in for the funeral or whatnot. So I would say we're definitely a lot more flexible. Because I'm a people person and I like to meet with people and talk to them, I still ideally think the best situation is face-to-face in the same room, because I think I just think that's how I can best serve a family. But I think we've also quickly in the last few years here become very good at, even if it's in front of a screen, making people feel like they're still being cared for and building those relationships that you very much need to build.
I agree 100%. I feel like we're social beings, right? And face-to-face communication is always my go-to. And it was hard for us, with what we do with meeting with businesses, going face-to-face wasn't there for the longest time, and still to a degree isn't with some. I'm zoomed out. I tell you that much. Right. If I never hop out in another Zoom, I'm fine with that. But it does still happen, and it's fine. I think the balance of each one, having it when needed, but having the ability to still go face to face. I know when I started meeting with businesses again face to face, it was, oh my God, it was like a sigh of relief. I was happy to do it again. So I agree. And I think it's good for the soul to be face to face with people. You just get a different communication, I feel like, is a little bit different when you're right with somebody.
Very much so.
Yeah. And I would have to say, the term you used, Jenna, I think I haven't heard, and I think you hit it right there. With businesses, you have to be flexible now. It's not a change everything you've done prior to what you're going to do in the future. It's just that flexibility, whether it's, Stephen hasn't, if you got clients all over the country, yeah, it's going to make it a lot easier now to hop on a video call that you just did maybe over the phone instead of seeing them face to face. And now you can start, seeing emotions on the screen versus, trying to hear it through a voice on a phone. So I think flexible is a perfect word, and hopefully businesses out there are doing that, not changing, but hey, we got to be flexible for whatever hits us next, down the road.
Right.
Now, when it comes to the business, I'm curious about this. Do you guys have any plans for growth in the future? Another location at all or anything like that? And, it's just something that pops in my head right now that I was kind of curious about.
Yeah, great question. As business owners, we're obviously always, keeping in mind what other options there are out there. Again, how to best serve families, what is best for the funeral home. So, it's always something that's in the back of your mind is possible expansion. possible, different ways to operate your business. So I won't say that it's not something that we've looked at before. It's something that you're just always keeping your eye out for and looking for possible opportunities in the future.
What would you say in your career? You've been there for how long now?
Oh gosh,
full time.
Full time. For let's see, since about 2008. Full time.
Okay, so almost 14 years roughly. In those 14 years, what has been the most rewarding thing for you?
I still, to this day, I love the relationships that I've built with families. And I see this more now the older I get. It's neat to me. When I first started out, maybe I was first meeting a family when I was on the parking lot, parking their cars for the funeral. And maybe I was the first one to greet them before they walked in the building that day for a funeral. And then maybe a few years later, there was another death in their family. And now I am maybe assisting my father or one of my cousins on a funeral. And I see them again and say, oh my gosh, I remember you when you were, parking cars. And now I'm at the point where, God forbid, maybe there's another death. And maybe I am walking into their living room at 2 a.m. to take a loved one into our care. And it's the relationships that I have built over the years, and still what I feel like is still a short career for me right now. Or just to these families where, maybe you think, oh gosh, I wonder if I helped them. Did I do everything right? Or are they happy? And maybe you get like a little thank you note down the road. And it's just sweet to know that you're helping families, you're building relationships, you're meeting people, and and maybe then you have the opportunity again to help them through a horrible time in the future, and you've already have a little relationship with them. So for me, that's what's really neat is definitely the relationships and just knowing that they are trusting us during some of the worst times in their lives. Right.
Mm-hmm. Getting back to the family aspect, next generation, I'm sure that's way down the road here, but I'm sure it's crossed your mind at some point. I know in my head with my kids, it's crossed my mind. It's crossed my mind if I even want them to as well. But, what are you, but not just you, but with your cousins as well too, at those discussions, do you guys have those discussions, maybe even just, out getting coffee or something like that?
Sure. It will definitely be for the next generation, very much so the same it has been for us. It's going to be their choice. If they want to, hang around a funeral home like we all did and get their hands dirty, well, they're all welcome to. My husband and I joke with my 3 small children. Sometimes one of them will say something and I'll look at him and go, well, that was very funeral director-ish. So yes, ultimately I want them to choose something that makes them most happy in life. But if some of the 5th generation just happen to be hanging out at a funeral home too, I think that would be pretty cool.
Well, look,
Jenna, with each family within the industry, I don't know if there is, but I obviously you have multiple little ones. So is anyone allowed to, or what's kind of the family picture on, is it just kind of one child, one kid per family, or really depending on the situation?
Sure. Particularly the generations before us, they had, because there were so many Renners in those generations, like my dad has, close to, I think, 50 just first cousins. So, in the beginning, they did have some stipulations on how many per family. They needed for a while a lot of my dad's cousins to help out when they were younger, because funeral homes back then also had ambulance service attached to it. In the beginning, it was really all hands on deck, whoever wanted to help out. But they did have some rules put into place about for the partners, how do we make this fair for each family? Now we're getting into my generation. and we still do have some rules and stipulations in play. But with less of us in this generation, again, we may have to be flexible and sit down and rethink some things. Again, just to go back to what's best for the funeral home.
Cool.
Well, look, we are coming up here close on 30 minutes or so, and we want to be respectful for your time. So we do appreciate you coming on. Is there anything else you'd like to add anyway? If anybody wants to get a hold of you, of any other questions or anything like that, you want to leave them an email or a phone number, anything like that?
Sure. Well, like I said, thank you so much for asking me to be here this morning. I appreciate that. If anybody does ever have questions, of course, our website is www.rennerfh.com. My email is Jenna, Jenna, at rennerfh.com. And, just with all funeral homes, you can call us 24/7, and you can get a funeral director that would be able to, not only a funeral director, but a Renner that would be able to answer any questions that you have. So.
All right, perfect. Well, again, Jenna, thank you for hopping on with us, and we will call this episode a wrap. Take 2 is over. We did it. No issues this time. So,
wonderful.
All right, we will catch everybody on the next episode. Thanks again, Jenna.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jenna.
Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Growing Belleville Through Community Chats podcast. Please remember to follow and subscribe to this podcast and share with your friends and community leaders. For additional information from this podcast, please reach out to the Greater Belleville Chamber of Commerce.